They have the most amazing courses this semester, and I will post, I think we're live. I will post the link to it before, maybe Rebbetzin Golshevsky will tell you a little bit, but I can't wait to start learning some of what they're giving over this semester. So I feel honored again, as always. We've had Yehudis quite a few times. It's always been an unbelievable privilege. So thank you so much. And Rebbetzin Golshevsky is the director of Shiviti. She holds primary and secondary teaching certification from Yavne Teachers College in Cleveland, as well as a BA from SUNY Buffalo in Classics Judaic Studies. Rebbetzin Golshevsky has been a well-known Torah educator in Jerusalem and abroad for 25 years, with students all over the world. She is a published author, editor, and translator, but teaching Torah is her first love. Thank you so much, Yehudis. It was really, I'm so excited, as always, to have you, and it's such a privilege for us. And if you want to, at the end, discuss Shiviti, please. I'm just going to go off now. Are you there?
I'm here. Nomi, how long do I have with the ladies today?
How long do you want?
I don't know, whatever you usually have for someone to speak. I don't want to belabor
So
anyone.
we it's give and take, 30 minutes give and take. You go over, okay. It's perfectly fine.
No, I just,
everybody wants to hear you, so it's all good.
For the women in Chutz La'aretz, you gotta, like, you have your day beginning, you have to, get
No,
on.
it's fine. It's fine. Okay. I'm telling you, it's amazing. Thank you so much.
I mean, literally. Happy Adar. When Nomi asked me, what am I going to talk about this time? I was like, what's the question? Laughter. I'm going to talk about laughter, which is kind of funny because everyone knows, explained humor is dead humor, right? The more you try and talk about humor, the less humorous it gets. It winds up sort of defeating the purpose. But since the midah of this month and next month, right? When I talk about the midah of the month, so I mean, we have in the 5th parak of Sefer Yetzirah, so we have a listing through all of the months from Nisan through Adar of the 12 months of the year and different aspects that attach themselves or that are borne out through each of the months, like embedded in each of the month from on high, from the very beginning of creation. So I think I'm gonna read you. I'm using the Nusach HaGra. I'll read it to you from the Sefer Yetzirah from the 5th parak. And no, Sefer Yetzirah, for those who are not familiar, it's one of our most deeply original and earliest Kabbalistic texts that we have. We have a tradition that it's attributed alternatively to Avram Avinu. Some say to Rabbi Akiva, and the text that we have has a few different nuschaot, but great sages throughout the ages have contributed their commentary of Saadia Gaon, the Vilna Gaon, etc., who've offered us some slight insight. And it's super cryptic, impossible to understand. It's code, of course. And there are those who say that it was using the Sefer Yetzirah that the Maharal Miprag was able to make a goylem. We're not doing anything like that. Obviously, don't try this at home. We're not doing anything like that. But the 5th parak has insights into the month that, like, for instance, if you've heard shiurim or if you've seen books written on based in the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar was the din of a Rebbe who has a beautiful, beautiful work that goes through all the months of the year, very deep Chassidus based in Kabbalah on the nature of each month and the avot of every month. Beautiful, beautiful mamar. And always his first mimer of his first piece on every month is rooted in the Sefer Yetzirah. And what's the nature of the month? So Bnei Yissaschar, even if you haven't seen the Sefer Yetzirah, if you're familiar with the Bnei Yissaschar, you might have come across these ideas before, because that's where they get a little bit more expansion. Okay, so with regards to the month of Adar, or in this case, the dual months of Adar, which means like we are in this is a very deeply Adar year. Yeah, it's like powerful Adar year because we have 2 moons of Adar, just like the Dagim, we have 2 fish, right? The Dagim they travel in schools, and the and meaning in multiples, and they are the mazel of this particular month. So we're in and we know that the Purim itself, the Purim miracle, also took place. It was in a year of the double month of Adar, and and that 13th month also gives us a month that also is for Esther. That extra month, that extra Adar is associated with Esther. So I'll give you the text. Himlich os kuf b'schok. HaKadosh Baruch Hu crowned the letter kuf over the tchuna, over the way of being that's called laughter. V'kasha lo keser, and he affixed a crown to it. And the idea of a crown on the letter, because the Sefer Yetzirah is very concerned with the letters, the idea of a crown on the letter implies that it has a power, meaning that there's a force. It's got a strong power. And he attached them one to the other. And in the world, because we have this idea of olam shana nefesh, there are three basic dimensions of reality: space, time, and soul. And so in the dimension of space, it's the constellation of Pisces, of the fish. And Adar b'shana, and in time, it is the space, it is the month of Adar, or in this case, the months. And the parallel in the body is the tchol. The tchol is the spleen. So I'm going to talk just a minute about the spleen. Now, the spleen is an organ that's in your body on the left-hand side. It's not that big. It's about the size of your fist. And it's in the left, sort of behind your ribs on your left-hand side. It's parallel on the right. It's like similar to in terms of its placement, it's similar to the liver, which is on the right. But it's not nearly as big. And your spleen is the place where your cells are kept, the cells that are in your blood. Your blood cells, white and red, and various other components in the blood are kept in balance. And production of red blood cells takes place also in the spleen. And it's interesting that spleen has a connotation in culture, like in language, like when you say somebody's irritable, easily angered, we call them an older word, which is not used that often anymore. They are splenetic, which means that in the old way of thinking about medicine, or maybe Chinese medicine, if somebody also does Chinese medicine. I'm not sure how spleen fits in foreign medicines, but in the old way of thinking about medicine, which is based on the humors of the body, etc. So the spleen was attached to the place of where your irritability, your anger and your irritability are in there, which is interesting because we say this is the organ, right? This is the organ that's associated with schok, with the letter kuf. Kuf itself is an interesting letter, right? Kuf is like a kof. Kuf is like a kof. What's a kof in Hebrew? Kof is a monkey. And we have a phrase that when we talk about something not being the way it should be, like we say, oh, kof b'fnei adam, like a monkey compared to a person. And it even says that ben mea, right? The sages said that when a person comes to be 100 years old, that's the kuf. Its gematria is 100. So it's like already, they're no longer in their tzura of being a person anymore. Chas v'shalom, they're already like kikof b'fnei adam, because the assumption is by that age they're already deteriorated, etc. But at the same time, you say a person who has gotten to the age of kuf, to be 100 years old, right? Like that's called a zaken muflag, somebody who's got potentially he's got so much wisdom, right? So there's some interesting in all of these elements that are brought here in Sefer Yetzirah. There's a bunch of interesting dichotomies. Now, because there are a few different nuschaot of the few different versions of the Sefer Yetzirah, so the other organ that's associated, because it's in a different text, is the organ that's known as the kor kiban. The kor kiban, one of my favorite organs, it's not in the human body at all. It's actually in the body of birds. A kor kiban is what we always learned was the pupik. Pupik is not a navel. The pupik is the part of the chicken. It's a muscular organ that's small. It's known as the crop. And because birds don't have teeth, what they do is they swallow down stones, and their crop holds the stones and it grinds. And when they take down a big lump of food, so the crop contracts, and it's like the equivalent of teeth to break down the food so that it can be digested. So it's the organ of what we call mechanical digestion, the breakdown in birds, and it's known as the crop. So that's the korkiban. And on the surface, we don't have too much relationship between the korkiban and the spleen. They don't appear to have too much to do with each other, but they must, because they are both associated in two different texts. They're both associated with the month of Adar, whose overriding tchuna, its nature, has to do with laughter. Now, okay, so the easy connection is it's Purim, right? Purim land. It's time for joking. But the whole idea of the tail end of the year, because biblically, right, the tail end of the year is not in Elul, the tail end of the year is in Adar, because the months are counted from Nisan. So by the time we get to Adar, the year is closing down. We're on the verge of a new beginning, which is basically the month, it's not basically, it is the month of redemption. And so Adar is the preliminary to redemption, right? If Nisan is the Chodesh HaGeulah, which it is, it's the month of redemption. So Adar is like the jumping off point to be able to come to the place of redemption. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said very famously, it's printed in most editions of the Likutei Moharan at the beginning, is that he said, also cryptically, right, mysteriously, he said in the beginning, all the haschalos were from Pesach. That means that spiritually speaking, the Jewish people on our journey as a people, and also like you could also extrapolate this for the individual, like everything begins from Pesach. It's like that's the renewal. And that's when Hashem took us out of Egypt. And that's when we start our story with him. And that's the beginning of our pathway to Kabbalas HaTorah, to going to receive the Torah. Like obviously all beginnings are from Pesach. Don't we say in Kiddush, don't we say in Tefillah, Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? That so many mitzvahs are Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. They bring us back to this place of origin of where it all began from. And so Rabbi Nachman said very famously, he said, always the beginnings all start from Pesach. And then he left it hanging. He said, V'achshav, and now, meaning now from our time and onward, from his time 200 years ago and forward, the beginnings are from a different point. And his students understood him to mean the beginnings are not from Pesach anymore. The beginnings are from Purim. Beginnings are from Purim. What does it mean the beginnings are from Purim? The Purim is the end of the year. Right? Adar is the end of the year, biblically. How can it become now the new beginning? So his students understood this to mean that Pesach is our idea of like being able to just jump into redemption. You have to leap into redemption. But Purim or Adar, prior to Nisan, is the idea that I need to have the energy to be able to leap into redemption. And so what normally I might have thought belongs at the end, which is like getting the last laugh, right? Adar, tzchok, the last laugh. It's the end of the year. Okay, the year is finished. Now, if it went well, you get to laugh, right? But instead, we have like a little bit of an inversion. If we see Nisan as the beginning of the year and the Geula needs to like be jump-started, where are you jump-starting it from? You have to jump-start it from Adar, which normally would be impossible because Adar is the end of the year. But you must begin your process of redemption not from Nisan anymore, but now from Adar. So Adar and its schok, right? It's laughter. I really wanted to spend time thinking a little more deeply about what is this idea. I'm going to get back to the two organs of the spleen and the korkiban and the crop. I haven't forgot about them. Okay, so we'll get back to them. We're just leaving them on the side for now a little bit. Now, when it comes to humor, again, you don't want to talk too much about humor that by the time you finish talking too much about humor, it's not funny anymore. But we sort of have to look at it a little and examine it. The first time that any shorish, that any root in a Hebrew word appears in the Torah, this teaches us about the nature of this shorish, teaches us about the essential nature of this word. So where does the first time that the word, the shorish of tzchok, or schok, where does it show up first? So the first place that it shows up in some variation is in the 17th chapter of Bereshis. And Avram Avinu laughs because he's just gotten the Besorah, he's just gotten the news that he, a man who's 100 years old, there's our kuf, right? He's getting on, he's not quite 100 yet, but he's getting there, that he's going to have a child. And he laughed. And then there's like, once that laughter is opened up, then there's a lot of shorashim of tzchok. And Sarah's laughing, and then she denies that she laughs, and then they name the child, and the child's name is Yitzchak. And then later on, when his mother sees that there's something in the relationship not so good with Yishmael, what's the thing that gives her a clue that she has to send Yishmael away? So Imenu, what does it say? She sees Yishmael mitzachek, that he's doing something, some kind of play that's not so good, not so kosher. And so she knows she has to separate him out, and so on. So all of these variations, even Lot, right? On the verge of the destruction of Sodom, Yitzchak is already in the world. When he tells his sons-in-law that they have to leave the city because the city is going to be destroyed. So they looked at him kimitzachek, right? It says they looked at him as if he was joking. And that's like basically this cluster in 2 or 3 prakim, in 2 or 3 chapters, we have the shorish of tzchok. Once it enters into the picture surrounding the birth of Yitzchak, so then we come across the shorish again and again and again, and then we don't see it again for a really long time. It's like there's this burst surrounding the birth of Yitzchak, and then after that we don't see this root, this Hebrew word, too much for a long time. So Yitzchak, right, is the first Jewish child. He's not the first child of Avraham Avinu, but he is the first Jewish child. Why do I say he's the first Jewish child? Because we understand that he's the child who's carrying he is the child of Avram and Sarah, and he is the child who's carrying the spiritual inheritance of his father. Yishmael doesn't carry it. Yitzchak, right? Ki v'Yitzchak yikareh l'chazera. Your child, your spiritual heir, is going to be in Yitzchak, not in Yishmael. So we say Yitzchak is the Jewish child, and his name means laughter. And if you could find me a figure in the Torah whose life was less funny than Yitzchak's, I would like to know who it is. In fact, his whole, what do we call, Hashem is called Pachad Yitzchak, right? He's called the awesome feared one of Yitzchak. His tchunat nefesh, his way of being in the world, we know, is on the side of Gvura, is on the side of Din, is on the side of Pachad. His way of serving Hashem is like the antithesis, we would think, is the antithesis of laughter. So we have to be able to put this together in our heads of how Yitzchak can be a Yitzchak, and really what is the nature of tzchok and tzchok. Okay, I'm not going to do too much about the distinction between tzchok and tzchok. That's, I think, too much for us today. But I want to talk more about humor altogether. Now, to begin with, let's kind of go back. Let's talk about humor in general. Humor is something that people get doctoral dissertations on, and they write theses on about theories of humor. And I'm going to share with you some of the prevalent theories of humor, okay? One of them is called superiority theory. Superiority theory is not so nice. It has a name. It's also called Schadenfreude, you know, in culturally. It means finding humor in other people's misfortunes or their failings. It's not so nice, right? Like seeing somebody, you know, blow it badly, and how we just kind of like, it's natural for people to just erupt in laughter from seeing somebody else mess up. And we don't like to admit it, but this is actually something that almost always triggers a laughter response in us. And so the way it's called is superiority theory. It's like, okay, that's him. I'm okay. I'm fine. I didn't just blow it that way. He did. So even if it's not articulated, that's what it's sitting on, okay? Now, there's another theory. There's something called relief theory. Relief theory is also not so nice. Relief theory is like, everybody's got an inner bad guy. So this is true. Yetzer, I don't know what we want to call it, but everybody's got like the inner dark side, the inner bad guy. And there are jokes that allow us to release our inner bad guy. Our inner bad guy gets like a little, gets to pop goes the weasel. It gets to rear its head a little bit. And that is called relief theory, just in a nutshell. That doesn't sound so nice either, right? And then there's something called incongruity theory. Incongruity theory is like having a laugh at having had an expectation. When something is incongruous, it doesn't fit, right? So I have an expectation of something going like this, and then I'm surprised. I get a surprise. So that seems like a little bit more benign, like a punchline that's just totally surprises you out of left field. It can also be very silly, or wordplay or slapstick, like the guy slipping on the banana peel is difficult because that could be also superiority theory, right? That could be also like, I'm a little bit, Nebuch, the guy fell slipping on the banana peel. So it's not just that it's surprising, but he also hurt himself. So I have to be careful with that one. It could be that it's not incongruity theory. It could be that it's superiority theory. You got to be careful. In any case, so we have different theories of humor because it's something that you'd wonder, why do people have to spend so much time and energy into researching into humor? Because humor is important, right? Humor is a healer. Humor bonds people together. Humor is an energizer. Humor is a natural part of human life, right? It's just like every culture always has its jokes. Every place where there are people, there's humor. But the fourth of them is the one I want to focus on, which I find the most fascinating. It's called benign violation theory. This is the one I like. Benign violation theory is exactly what it sounds like. When something is benign, it means it's not harmful, right? And violation means that that something could have been damaging. So it's sort of like something could have been damaging, but it turned out not to be damaging. Something could have been harmful, but it turned out not to be harmful. So let's say, I'll give you an example. If, has it ever happened to you that like you tripped your heel on the steps? Have you ever done one of those, like, taking 5 steps, like boom, 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 like going down on a heel or on your feet, and just, you sort of managed to catch yourself? Now, if you just were to see somebody do this, so the violation, right, is that there's a potential for damage there. That let's say if I saw somebody else, chas v'shalom, this happening to them, they're halfway down a staircase and they trip and they're going, okay. Now, and they got to the bottom of the staircase and nothing happened. They didn't hurt themselves. They didn't fall. They just did this very like I don't know, like in some kind of a movie, like some kind of a stunt, right? Now, while it was happening, I'm going to be in a state that's fraud. There's 2 different things going on. I'm worried, right? I'm on edge because I can't stop the person from falling, and all I'm doing is witnessing it. At the same time, if they manage to get to the bottom of the staircase and they're standing and they're like, whew, they're okay, then everybody kind of breaks out in laughter. I could say, and it's natural to do so, for me to laugh, because there was something very funny, but it's only funny because it was a benign violation. The violation is that what could have happened is chas v'shalom, the person could have really hurt themselves on the stairs. So that's a violation episode. I mean, something could have been harmed. It's potential for damage. But it turned out to be benign. It turned out to be not harmful at all. And the flood of like that tension between having the expectations that something could have been harmed, and then that it turned out that everything is fine, that provokes laughter. And that's called benign violation theory. That's the one I like, that one. Because it's really just a way of explaining, like, why do we have the responses that we have? So, I know if so, you could question the value maybe of why should somebody spend several years doing research into this, but it's still interesting, right? So it's not only in physical humor. Good benign violation theory can be like political satire. There are situations that are not funny at all, right? Whoa. Somebody said her husband fell down the stairs. He should be well. Okay, Hashem Yazor, he should only be well. I'm not making a joke out of anybody falling down the stairs. Chas v'shalom. Chas v'shalom. He should be well. Shavu for Shlema. Now, so even something like political satire, right? There are things that are not funny at all, stuff that goes on in the world, right? And nevertheless, so that's called violation. It means it's a situational, that can be potentially very fraught and with great potential for damage, political conditions. Nevertheless, you take that and you temper it with a joke, meaning I am casting the benignity over a fraught situation. And so that's something that people can be very, can appeal to. And that's how we talk about the therapeutic value of humor. Like Jews are great jokesters. Jews are great humorists. And it's something that's very well known. Why? So this is also part of our, it's part of a coping mechanism, because one of the best ways to deal with trauma is to be able to transform it into benign violation humor, meaning you take something that's really serious. I mean, I grew up among Holocaust survivors. They had the most awful jokes, the darkest, strangest sense of humor in the family, in the extended family. My husband's family, my husband doesn't get this at all. He's like, certain jokes I can't make with him because it's too much violation there. Even though it's benign violation, it's too much for him. But at least I have the other side of the family, that they get it. And some of my kids, they get it, although some of them don't. I have to be very careful who I make, which kinds of jokes I make to which kids, because some of them actually find that very healing. It's healing and it's therapeutic to be able to take something that's very serious and to be able to transform it and temper it through laughing about it. Now, so that's like the breakdown of it. It's a kind of digestion of it. There we get to the crop. A kind of breaking down and digestion of something that could be intensely painful. And then it's no longer a source of pain, right? That's the part of the therapeutic value of humor. So now we go back to our spleen and our spleen and our crop, right? Spleen, you say, all your vitality is coming from your spleen. At the same time, there's this ancient association with the spleen with being like this place of anger, because it turns out that the places where we have the greatest potential for irritability and anger and frustration and trauma, that's called spleen, is actually the place where we have an enormous potential for vitality, because it's the place where you produce all your red blood cells from and where you have all your balance of within your blood itself, and your immune system and your healing, right? Your white blood cells as well. So your spleen plays such a valuable role, but at the same time, like the ancients understood the spleen to be this like a place where really there's like a lot potentially locked in there of pain and the response to suffering in a negative way, because it's also a place of transformation. If we're thinking about the organ, not only in its physical sense, but in its we'll call it like a paraphysical sense. And then we'll think about the korban. I don't have a korban. I'm not a chicken. I don't have a korban. I have only the pupik of the kind that my Baba used to talk about, like the pupik, like as if it's your navel. It's not your navel. My father, Zichron Lebracha, grew up on a chicken farm. So like we had early education in the great values of making fricassee with pupiks, because, that's what they did when they shechted the chickens, use every part of the chicken. So he used to talk about my Baba's fricassee with the pupiks. So I learned very young, what is a pupik? Anyway, and but I told you, what is it? Muscular organ that's used to pre-digest the material that the bird otherwise cannot digest. And in order to be able to do this act of digestion, you know how birds, they peck at the ground. They're not only looking for insects and worms and crumbs, they also take in stones to replenish the crop. The crop has to have, because they don't have teeth. So the teeth are like acquired stones, and they grind and grind and grind and grind, because otherwise the bird can't get any nourishment out of this lump of food that it's taken down without it going through some process of mechanical digestion. So that's what the crop does. And that's also what humor does. That's also what Adar does, is that it allows us, we could think, well, I'll do it when it's over, let's laugh about this when it's over. Last laugh. And Rabbi Nachman said 200 years ago, no. Now the beginnings are from Adar. They used to be from Pesach. It could be that we had I don't know, enough national or personal fortitude to be able to just like jump right into redemption. But it turns out that we don't really have that anymore. We need to first be energized by tzchok. We need to be energized by adar. We need to be energized by simcha in order to be able to leap into redemption. So let's look back at Yitzchak. I'm not going to give you too much longer. I feel like this is already close to my time. No? So let's think about Yitzchak. Now, Yitzchak, his beginning is in this idea like of impossibility. Why is everybody laughing? Why does Yavram Avinu laugh when he hears the news he's going to have a child? Because it's impossible. Why does Sarah Imenu laugh? Even if she only laughed inside of herself and she didn't actually laugh out loud, whatever. Okay, I'm not going to go into all the maforshim there. But what is it? It's a denial of the thing that appears to be impossible. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's message through the Malachim is, it's not impossible. What makes you think it's impossible? There's a line from the story of the Chacham V'Tam of Rabbi Nachman. It's Hashem Yisborach HaKol Efshar. By Hashem, everything is possible. By HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything is possible. So he starts off his life, he comes into the world and receives his name of Tzchok Asali Elokim, right? Tzchok Asali Elokim. Elokim is the divine name that's associated with judgment and harshness and the side of din. And Tzchok Asali Elokim. Elokim made a joke from me. I think this is like gets to the root of what does it mean benign violation. The Jewish people and every individual, like we are always trying to find the place where we can come and say, I may be seeing dinim in the world, in my life, chas v'shalom, I may be seeing things that appear to be harsh. Tzchok asali elokim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is setting me up for a very, very big laugh. He's setting me up for a very, very big laugh. The biggest party of a yontif is Purim, right? It says that there was no time in the entire history of the Jewish people that we were in more danger than we were when Achashverosh handed over the seal of his kingship to Haman to make a decree against the Jewish people. There was not a single moment in our entire history. We're here for thousands of years. We're 3,500-year-old people, Be'erich, right? More or less. We have a very long history with a lot of ups and downs. And Chazal chose that one moment to say, this is the one moment we were in the greatest danger. And this is our biggest joke of a holiday. Purim Milan. Put on masks, you drink, you this, you that, it's Efker. Because we are like, that's like the secret of that's our first Jewish child, right? Yitzchak. That's a secret of Jewish survival, the secret of Jewish life, the secret of redemption is to be able to say, Tzchok Asali Elokim. That every place where I see dinim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm waiting there, and I'm saying I'm winking, Hashem is winking at me, and I'm winking at him, and I say, I know that you sometime or another, you're going to reveal the benign that is in this violation. Because we can't act as if there's no violations. Look at Yitzchak Avinu. It's like 37 years old, he's brought to the Akedah. It's the 10th of his father's challenges. What kind of this is the laughter of Yitzchak? That after all of this time of barrenness, and after all of this waiting and praying for a Yitzchak, it's all going to end on top of a mizbeach, on top of an altar, where his own father, who's the Amud HaChesed, is going to take a knife to him and is going to destroy him. And he does it, and he's ready to do it. And Yitzchak is ready also to give up his life. You say, what kind of a joke are you playing on us, Ribono Shel Olam? What are you playing at, Ribono Shel Olam? But underneath it, because he's a Yitzchak, is the knowledge, it's certain knowledge that it's I don't want to say it's a joke, people misunderstand, but it's like the deepest kind of joke possible. Because what is the joke? You think it's going to be this, but it turns out to be that. And that you thought it was a disaster, but it turns out, no, trip down the stairs. Whoa! And I'm not minimizing, because we know that I'm not minimizing the our history and our traumas. But you know something? I think that we have deep well springs of Adar in us. the Jewish people has deep, deep well springs of Adar that we're always having to touch back into and get back into again and again of this like disaster, the disaster interrupted, right? The benign violation. And to have that be a place of renewal for us. Here we are in Adar, right? Preparing ourselves for the month of Geula. It's the month of Geula. And I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to let you go because I'm not going to keep you forever. But I'll tell you a story. So it's a very well-known story about the Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh. I'm going to tell it anyway. If you know it, well, too bad. So I'm being a little silly. It's okay. I'm allowed. So in the time of the Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh, there was a district that was suffering terribly from drought. So so the people in the district, also his pathway of teaching was not very widespread at that point. It was still early in his Gilui. He wasn't so very well known at that point. So the people in the district, the Rabbanim of the community, was a lot of communities were suffering under this terrible drought because the whole area. And in one particular town, the Rabbanim had declared that there should be a fast, but not stam a fast, because they had gone a very long time without rain. And the crops were suffering, and the animals were suffering, the people are suffering. So as is usual, it is normal for the rabbis to declare a fast in the case of Atziras HaGeshem, when there's no rain. And so they not only declared a fast for one day, they declared a fast for 3 days. And they said that men and women and children, everybody is fasting for 3 days and davening and doing tshuva. And the practice was at that time that they were magidim, that they were rabbis of the community. And in addition, you had also the magid. A magid was usually an itinerant preacher who moved around from town to town, who had a certain number of towns under his authority, and he would go on alternate Shabbosim and so on, moving around from place to place to bring the people to tshuva, fire and brimstone. So the people, everyone in the town, they're fasting 3 days. Everyone, like whoever's in the street, there's hardly anybody in the street. It looks like, they look like Churban Beis HaMikdash, what's going on over there. On the 3rd day of the fast, of the public fast in this town, and they're getting shmusin, and they're getting fire and brimstone, preaching from the Magidim and from the Rabbanim, tshuva, tshuva, tshuva. And the Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh, in the afternoon of the 3rd day, rolls into town in a wagon with his students. And in the middle of the square of the town, he sets up tables, and he sits down with his chevraya, and they set up a beautiful big feast, and they take out wine, and they have lots of food, and they set themselves up, and they make l'chaims, and they start to eat this meal. And the people in the town, they will come out to the town square, and they're infuriated. I mean, the people are very, very upset, because here they are, like, what does he come to make jokes out of them? And the Rabbanim of the community are very upset, because we're trying to, this is something that we're doing for tshuva for the whole community. We want to save the situation. People are going to die. And the Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh, they're laughing, no chevraya, and they're laughing. So finally, the Rav of the community, he comes and he says, you have to explain yourself. This is a very, very big chutzpah, what you're doing. And the Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh says, what do you think Hashem understands from you when you fast for 3 days? That you can live without food and water. He said, and here we set up the table, and we have food and drink. And what we tell Hashem is, we can't live another minute without you providing us with the needs that we require. We cannot do this. We can't fast for a week. We can't fast. We need rain, and we need parnasa, and we need the crops to be growing beautifully, and we need the animals to have what they require. We need it because we need it. And of course, what do you think happens? What's the end of the story? Thunder, lightning, the clouds roll in, right? Rainstorm. So in Hasidus, we say this is like the difference between tshuva of Elul and tshuva of Adar. Tshuva of Elul and tshuva of Adar is that there is a place for tshuva of Elul, which is in deep introspection and in doing a kind of cleansing out of tshuva. And that's 100%, it has its place in Avodas Hashem, no question. But there's also something called the tshuva of Adar, because, you have two polar parts of the year. You have the preparation of Elul, which is for Tishrei, and you have the preparation of Adar, which is for Nisan. And the proper preparation for Geula is not self-denial, but the deep, deep humor of tzchok, and to make a party, and to tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I can't live without you, and we require your shefa, and we need a redemption in all of the good ways. And also to remember to always wink your eye at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever you see, and whatever you experience, Chas v'shalom, and anything that's difficult, and you see things weird going on in the world, don't forget to wink your eye at Hashem and know that He's winking back at you. Big tzchok. That we're involved, tzchok asali elokim. Every place where I'm seeing dinim, where I see harshness, I have to know that in the inside of it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting to reveal to me the yitzchak of He will laugh, that there is going to be big laughter, and azim aleschok pino, and our mouths will then be filled with laughter, and all of the stuff that we thought was the worst, the absolute worst, the biggest tragedy, the biggest catastrophe, chas v'shalom, that we ever experienced in our individual lives or historically, all of this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal to us how it was always. Humor and laughter waiting to happen. And I think I'm done. We were done.
Wow, as always. Yehudis, that was just incredible, unbelievable. Yehudis, can you give people a little bit of a background of Shaviti, so if they would like to sign up for this semester,
okay, so
please?
This week we started new classes. Some of them are continuations from before, but usually they can be entered into even if you haven't heard from the beginning. So go to shiviti.org.il. You can see the description of classes. We do everything on Zoom. If you're in Yerushalayim, 2 classes that I teach on Zoom, I also teach in my house on Tuesday mornings. So for women who want to come in and participate live, it's a very nice chevra. So you can register for class and you can show up, but it's very important to register for classes.
Yehudis, what class is that Tuesday mornings?
I teach Zohar on the Parsha at 10 in the morning, and then at 11:15, I am teaching Rabbi Nachman's teachings. We're doing the story of the exchanged children, which is really, really,
wow.
It's very beloved to me. So there's what we do in Shiviti, there's classes, I don't know how many, like 15, 16 hours of classes a week. We have a lot of different teachers. Rachel Silber teaches for us, Yael Dworkin, Shoshana Yudelman out in Efrat, I teach. My husband teaches a halacha class. There's a very broad spectrum, everything from Tanakh to Hasidus to Kabbalah things, Parsha. There's a lot going on. So you are welcome to check it out. SHIVITI.il. Yeah. And listen,
I'm going to send it out to all the WhatsApp groups. So
please, but like money should not be the consideration. Okay. We are a tuition-based program, but we also have a very, very big scholarship portion of things. And no one is ever turned away from taking a class because of anything having to do with money. So like if something looks interesting to you and you have the time and you want to learn, register. You can register. If you can afford it, you can pay. But you can also register for assistance. So whatever, okay? Just learn. That's the main thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yehudis. It was amazing.